Hi guys, just before I jump in, I wanted to let you know there are some live online songwriting workshops coming up. There'll be more info at the end of the video and details in the show notes. I started recording an album project in July 2021, and what do you know, 1 week into the recording process, we went into an extended lockdown here in Sydney, Australia. But this project is a project that has a schedule and a deadline. It's not just my own thing that can sort of happen whenever I want. It's an album of original work that's going to be interwoven into an audio book that's being released by Penguin Random House in this year, 2022. So there are other people involved. There's deadlines. We couldn't just wait for the lockdown to end to get this album recorded. In this video, I'm going to show you how myself and my producers remotely did the vocal production for this album with me in my home studio here and them in their studio in a different part of the city. What I want to do is show you the equipment that I used to create professional level studio vocals on a record, and specifically to show you actually the Logic settings and the Zoom settings that we used for our sessions. As a bit of context, what happened in these live sessions is my producers are in their studios, zooming in. I'm here with my recording equipment and I have the session here. So they're not running the session through a DAW in their studio with my vocals feeding into their session. I'm still running the session through my DAW. We decided we would record the vocals remotely using my equipment in my home studio and my space. Now, that terrified me a little bit, and I'll tell you the reasons why. The first reason is that my space here is not very well soundproofed, and you might actually be able to hear it a little bit. So I am 20 meters away from the street. I have neighbors closely packed on either side of me. I have cicadas going off. It's summertime here and they just go nuts. There's construction happening at the end of my street. I have a train line 200 meters that way. So there's all sorts of noise leakage that is not ideal for recording vocals. The reason you might be able to hear a little bit of ambient sound right now, even though I'm recording through my vocal mic, is because I've turned the gain up quite a lot because I'm speaking, I'm not singing, and I'm also further away from the mic than I normally would be. So it's actually absorbing a lot more sound than it would during actual like vocal production when I'm this close to the microphone, okay? The other reason I was a little bit terrified of having to record vocals in my home studio is because there's just something special about going into a different space to record the lead vocals. It's such a performative act. And for me, in my experience, being able to go into a different studio, something happens and it brings out the best, and I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to bring that game if, 2 minutes ago I was sort of eating lunch and talking on the phone and folding the laundry. But with the setup that I'm going to show you, I was able to overcome both of those obstacles, the sound issues and also the performative issues. The first thing I want to show you is the equipment that I have here in my home studio for recording vocals. Obviously, the first thing you need is a computer, and I use a MacBook Pro. I also use Logic as my DAW. I have a microphone and I use a Rode K2. The other thing you need in your studio, of course, is an audio interface. So that's what the microphone plugs into, and then that connects to the computer. Of course, I also have my headphones. And the other things you'll notice in my setup here, of course, I've got a mic stand. I've also needed to set my computer up on a piano stand or a keyboard stand here that allows me to control the DAW as I'm recording the vocals. You also need a decently quiet space, but it doesn't have to be perfect. So as I said, my space is far from perfect, but what I've done to optimize within this environment of non-optimal noise is I've positioned my mic as far away from the street as possible, facing the most quiet part of the room. While we were recording, I also closed all the windows, closed the door, and that actually did a lot to cut out some of the ambient sound. I'm going to play for you some of the vocal takes that we took with this mic in this position right here as I am. Listen closer. Through the backstage door, you'll hear us out there. You'll hear us call. And honestly, that's it for equipment. With my computer, DAW, mic, audio interface, and headphones, I was able to produce totally professional level vocals. So now we start to get into the Logic and Zoom settings during the live recording session. So first, let's look at the Logic settings. So the first thing I do while recording, okay, is set the Logic audio input and output to my audio interface, which is an Apollo Twin made by Universal Audio. While my producers are with me live on Zoom, I set the Zoom input and output also to the audio interface. The key thing with this during recording is do not share sound through Zoom. Okay, if you try to share sound through Zoom, you're going to get latency and it's basically impossible to record. You can, however, share your screen. So if you want your producers to be able to see your DAW session, you can totally share the screen and that does not affect latency. So while I'm recording, those are the Logic and Zoom settings, and that worked really well while I was tracking the vocals, doing overdubs, all that kind of stuff. The next settings that I want to show you are when we're actually listening back and starting to do a little bit of comping. And if I'm doing comping and we want to listen to the different takes, we change the settings. So what I'm doing here is changing the settings for high fidelity playback. Okay, so the first settings that I'm going to change are in Logic. So I go again into preferences and audio, and here I'm going to pick Zoom audio as the in and out. The next thing I want is for my producers on the other side to be able to hear what I've done in hi-fi stereo sound. So I can actually do that in Zoom. What I'm going to do in Zoom is I'm going to click share. And now that I've shared, I'm going to first go down to the sound options. Firstly, I'm going to click the little arrow and I'm going to click this hi-fi stereo option. Then I click the tick box and then I share my screen. So now on the other side, my producers in their studio in another part of the city are now hearing the sort of highest fidelity stereo audio that's possible to share, I think, through Logic and through Zoom. But that was absolutely good enough for them to be able to hear, give me comments, for us to be able to start comping things together. And it's relatively quick to swap between the recording settings and then the playback settings.
You spend the early hours preparing, hoping that by moonrise things are better. You hold the light up to the ruins, never let it slip or shatter.
And honestly, that's it. So things that worked well were that I found I was able to overcome the performative limitations that I was worried about because I had my producers live with me, giving me feedback, giving me tips and reflections that I wouldn't be aware of if I was just trying to do it by myself. Things that were not ideal with this situation are that there was still ambient sound, right? And so to compensate for that, one of the things that I've done is I have ordered myself an isolation shield. So an isolation shield is something you attach to your mic stand and it essentially blocks the sound coming from that side. So honestly, the quality that I was able to achieve was already so good that I think the isolation shield is going to add to that and just give me even more confidence that I can produce session level vocals for my albums in my home studio without having a full-on soundproofed studio. The other thing that wasn't ideal was that my computer fan was going the whole time and I couldn't really do anything about that because I needed my computer here to manage and control the DAW. But ultimately it seemed not to spill onto the track, which was good. And even if it did, at the very least, it was consistent throughout. And if we need to EQ it out, we can probably figure out how to do that. But honestly, I didn't really hear it. It wasn't a problem. It's behind the cardioid pattern. So it seemed okay for now. I've included a gear list below in the video notes where there are also some details about our upcoming live online workshops. If you want to get a monthly newsletter from me with updates on what's going on, please sign up. Again, the information is below. You can also just check out my website where you can book immediately into workshops if you're just like, yes, this is what I want. I hope this was helpful to someone. Who knows? I never know. If it was, let me know. And if you have any other tips on recording vocals at home, please feel free to let me know in the comments. Thanks guys, bye.